Welcome back into the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where I am done with the NFL for the year. It's wrap it up. It's over. The Arizona Cardinals have really set a new standard, October 6th, and I'm tuning out. It's pretty impressive. I'm Brendan Clean, a staff writer at Awful Announcing. That's Ben Axelrod. He is the senior editor at Awful Announcing. It is Monday, October 6th. Hit follow, hit subscribe. We're live on YouTube. We're also wherever you get podcasts. We're here for you 3 times a week. And as we often do on Monday, it is a little bit of a sports media, football media roundup of the weekend. Although unlike some of those weeks, it is pretty intense topic-wise. A lot of news that is serious today on this Monday, and we'll get right to it. Let's start, Ben, with the more recent development, which is an update on what we talked about last Monday, and that has to do with Paul Finebaum, the ESPN and SEC network analyst who, when we were talking last about him, had seemingly announced, although not officially, his intention to run for U.S. Senate in Alabama. And you and I got the fallout from this dead wrong, because we both thought he would kind of just move forward business as usual after this interview that he did with Clay Travis, where he discussed his intentions. And that seemingly is not what happened, because Finebaum did appear on Get Up the following day or two after the September 30th interview. He did appear on the Matt Berry podcast on Sunday, but it would appear that a lot of his other typical ESPN television appearances did not come to pass. Clay Travis followed that up. On3 appeared to verify that Finebaum or his camp or somebody around him is receiving that as a sidelining, a suspension. You never want to be too concrete with whatever we want to call this, Ben, but there were some ramifications here on ESPN's part, and Finebaum finds himself in the position that a lot of people have at ESPN when they step outside of the boundaries, step over a line when it comes to politics. What were your thoughts on this surprise update Monday morning?
Well, we also have another surprise update here as we are live, and that's from Austin Karp of the Sports Business Journal, who reports that Finebaum was never banned and that he'll be on First Take on Tuesday. And so this feels a little bit like North Carolina posting the Drake May highlight on Monday morning as it goes viral that Bill Belichick has banned North Carolina from posting about Patriots players. Like it very much feels kind of reactionary. I don't know that to be a fact, but this wasn't one. Even if this was just Clay Travis, I think Clay Travis has a pretty good source on this. Like he's the one who got the interview with Finebaum, where Finebaum at least, talked about all this and announced his potential intentions of running for office. And then
we should say too, right, that Bill Hofheimer from ESPN, a longtime representative on the PR team over there, immediately took to Twitter to deny this, which is rare to see happen either. So there's a lot of strongly worded things on both sides here that's even with the news that he's going to be on First Take tomorrow. That almost confuses me more.
The other thing, though, is you just go back and look at the appearances. He was on ESPN less last week than he is typically on during the football season. And he was on Tuesday, which was the day after all of this broke. And then he wasn't on the rest of the week. And so he still did the SEC network. He still did Matthew Berry's podcast. Like he was still making those kind of secondary appearances, but he was not on like ESPN flagship, which he typically is on a pretty regular basis throughout the football season. So, if he wasn't
including
banned
Sunday mornings, right, when he's typically on Sports Center, and that's usually a pretty viral segment because it's him just riffing through all the outcomes from Saturday, and that wasn't there this week either.
Yeah, and he's on First Take usually, or at least pretty regularly on Monday mornings. He wasn't on this morning. I don't think he was on last week either, but he was on less, and so that has to be explained. And I think ESPN's like in a really tough spot. in some part through its own doing because of the standard it has set with Stephen A. Smith, and that they have let Stephen A. Smith, pontificate on politics and express his own desire to potentially run for office. And even if, I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it does create the perception of a double standard. And it does allow people to think, or at least, tout the idea that Paul Finebaum expressed that he's going to run for office or potentially run for office as a Republican, and then he got pulled from air. Meanwhile, Stephen A. Smith is saying that he wants to run as a Democrat for president, and he remains on air. And I know that's not what's actually happening here.
Do you think people are dumb enough to believe that?
Yes.
People who approach this story with an open mind, somebody who might find this video on YouTube from you and I, or open up the news app on Monday when they have a lunch break, who aren't in the middle of the internet bullshit all the time and just are like, what's going on with Paul Finebaum? You think that that's going to convince them? Because to me, like, the very clear distinction is two distinctions between how Stephen A. has handled himself and how Finebaum, what he said in that original September 30th interview with Clay Travis. To me, the first one is Finebaum was far more specific about what office he would run. I guess president isn't exact, but like the timeline of it, the race, the candidacy, the campaigning, people that have talked to him specifically, and if Donald Trump said to do it, I couldn't say no. Like, way more literal and detailed than anything Stephen A. Smith has blustered about on The View or something. I know that there's similarities. I know it's not. But he can't run for president right now, and we all know that, and we all know that it's a generalized kind of a conversation. I think if Stephen A. Smith started to run for president, ESPN would probably have to respond in kind. And I think that the other distinction is that, and this one is actually where my mind went first when I saw, this actually had some legs to it, which is that Paul Finebaum said on the record in that interview, I voted for Donald Trump, but ESPN doesn't let me say that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the type of stuff, whether you're talking about Bill Simmons or any other number of people, even whatever might have happened behind the scenes with Pat McAfee. Like, when you start to discuss the behind the scenes of the company, we most likely are going to see some action, right? And Stephen A. Smith has never said anything like that. And if you give Stephen A. credit for anything, it's that he's always incredibly careful to not say that type of thing publicly. Yeah,
I mean, I agree. It's what Bill Simmons was like, I dare you to suspend me. And and ESPN then suspended him. Like, I think that's the difference here. I think the other difference, as you alluded to, is Paul Finebaum probably is going to run for office. Like, it seems like he is, although he hasn't officially announced it. And that's what, Clay Travis is hanging on to is, hey, he's only speculating about it the same way Stephen A. is speculating about it. But I think the difference is, like, I don't think Stephen A. Smith is going to run for president. And if he does run for president, that's still a couple of years away. Paul Finebaum, it seems like this is going to be a pretty sped up. Like, you could do contextual clues here and see he's probably going to run. But
maybe there's already machinations behind the scenes that ESPN knows about that are already moving forward, and they just don't want to be associated as strongly. That could easily be part of it too, right?
For sure. I think my counter, though, would be how many people are approaching this, like, with an open mind. How many people know the nuance and the details, and, well, actually what he would be punished for is calling out ESPN's anti-politics. Like, I just think people see, he talked about running for office. He's a Republican. Stephen A. Smith talked about running for office. He's a Democrat. One of them still on the air. The other one's not. I think that's a pretty powerful tool. If you're Paul Finebaum and you're getting to launch a Senate campaign, is, hey, I'm choosing this over my professional career and all the anti-establishment stuff and all the woke Disney, woke ESPN stuff. Like, that is stuff that would theoretically work in his favor in a Alabama Republican primary.
I hear you, and you're probably not wrong in the big picture, but ESPN is also, I would say, the vast majority of people, just by way of who happens to work for that network, who they've punished for engaging in political chatter of any kind over the years, have almost universally been liberal. So the idea that ESPN brings the hammer down on the Republicans all the time is like not really a thing that you can say
Yeah,
concretely. I get that
Steele. You have Sage Steele. You have
yeah,
Allison Williams. Like, you have examples.
yeah, but you also have Dan Lebitard and
Yeah,
Bill Simmons and
for sure.
Jamel Hill, and so I don't know. I think you're definitely not wrong if there's an opportunity for Finebaum or anybody around him who is invested in him entering and winning this race to turn it into some kind of narrative. I definitely think it's likely we see that. Hey, the media
I think that's already
biased
happening
against us, and yeah. So I don't disagree with that, but I guess just to try to thread the needle of the Stephen A. thing, like, I think there are pretty obvious differences besides the political affiliation that I would hope could come through to a more, maybe sports-centric or sports media nerd audience, even if the political theater of it is obviously going to play out how it's going to play out. But, before long, Finebaum's going to just have to leave ESPN, period. And we already kind of knew that was going to have to happen. So whatever the nature of this, it's all going to be figured out in either days or at the most like less than 2 months. I think he gave that as sort of the timeline even at the beginning when he talked to Travis about all of it. All right, let's get to Mark Sanchez and the winding turns of this very scary and unfortunate story that started late Friday night into Saturday morning in Indianapolis, where Mark Sanchez was to broadcast the Colts-Raiders game for Fox Sports. Of course, he is a game analyst over there, has been somewhat of a rising star on their roster. Got a digital show that was airing on FS1 as recently as last month, and popular guy, recognizable quarterback, all of that sort of stuff. And his career appears to be off of the rails due to some decisions that he made Friday night, where, according to local police reports that we've seen from news stations out there, that mostly the account of a witness and the victim, Sanchez approached a delivery truck and became physical with the driver, a man who was quite a bit older than Mark Sanchez, and routine type of day-to-day thing that he does at this luxury hotel. I think like replacing the fry grease for the kitchen or something like that was how I saw it. And one thing led to another. We don't obviously have every single detail here, but allegedly Sanchez became physical with the man, threw him to the ground, was sort of, beating him up basically, and the man tried pepper spray. Sanchez didn't stop. The man then stabbed Sanchez repeatedly. And we've seen photos of the victim now, the elderly man that Sanchez approached and became physical with. It's pretty gruesome and ugly. Sanchez was arrested at the hospital. His charges have since 3 charges. One of them has since been upgraded to a felony battery charge, Ben, which would be, if he were to, go through the legal process, could be up to 1 to 6 years in prison. Pretty insane. I think that there's a media coverage angle that I want to hit here, but just in general, one of the craziest stories we've had in sports media in 2025, and 2 people who were seriously wounded because of seemingly, allegedly, decisions that Sanchez made, inebriated late night in Indianapolis for work.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you'll definitely remember, for years now, following, and obviously there are going to be ramifications for Mark Sanchez's career. I agree. I think he was a rising star as a NFL analyst, and you get, the first push alert, which I'm sure is how most of us consume this, or you saw it on Twitter, and it's Mark Sanchez stabbed in critical condition, and your mind immediately goes to like, oh my God, I hope he's okay. And obviously everyone hoped he was okay. And, there was the report from Adam Schefter that it was the result of a robbery. And so, it's pretty easy to piece together a narrative there as to what might have happened. And then it comes out like 2 hours later, like, oh, Mark Sanchez has been charged, and he, more details come out, and it, the narrative starts to really shift, and you start to, I don't even know if like the narrative came out until Sunday about like what happened, like the play-by-play of it, but just like what the charges were, it was pretty easy to piece together. Like this seemed like a self-defense type of incident. And so,
Ricky Pearsall, we've seen a lot of things like this. There's athletes more and more that's been whose homes have been getting robbed. Like you started to assume that's where this story was headed. And then all of a sudden he's got handcuffs. I mean, I don't know this, at a hospital bed, and you're just like, holy shit.
Yeah. And I think like, probably again, like this is all right now. It's still relatively early in the story and all of that. But the fact that Mark Sanchez got stabbed and was then arrested so quickly, and then you see the footage, the pictures of the alleged victim, and it becomes clear, like you would think if somebody gets stabbed, both people are going to get arrested and they'll sort it out and go from there. The fact that the victim was never like arrested or charged, like it seemed pretty clear that the police were able to piece together pretty instantly this was a self-defense thing. And looking at the pictures, it's pretty easy to put that together. So it's, again, still early, still allegedly, still all that, but like it's pretty easy to connect the dots on this one, and it does not look good for Mark Sanchez in multiple ways.
Yeah, and to, I guess, tie up the news of it and give the account of what we know so far. Sanchez, in the police report, allegedly told police officers that he doesn't remember anything after he first approached the vehicle before any of the violence ensued. He supposedly ran off after originally the stab wound and, I guess probably the pain, and snapped him out of whatever state he was in. I don't know. And then he was treated at a hospital and obviously, like we said, later arrested. Fox took him off the game. Of course, his health wouldn't have allowed it, even if the arrest hadn't happened. Brady Quinn filled in for him, and Fox has, basically acknowledged the incident, and on a couple of different shows just gave a typical, wishing the best to the victim and to Mark, and we'll update as we can type of thing. So that's where we leave it. And of course there will be updates. I think Sanchez has been discharged from the hospital now and is in jail. And the man who the victim is actually seeming to be still recovering, which shows you, the severity there too. But so you talked about the Schefter side of this, Ben, and I wrote about that for the newsletter because, I'm not on the ground in Indy and I'm not any sort of investigative reporter, so I didn't have anything new to add to the situation, but I was like legitimately baffled by the way that ESPN's NFL Insider handled this story. And I'll even say, maybe this is affected by hindsight a little, I woke up to seeing, if I'm remembering correctly, an ESPN push notification from Schefter, which is common now because I've signed up for those through the app, about this thing. And I was like, it's a little odd that Schefter would cover this at all. And so for the newsletter, I went back and looked. Ian Rappaport's coverage, to the extent that he did any of this, was retweeting the Fox statement and then the local police statement, and that's it. Jordan Schultz, I was like, well, he can do whatever he wants. He doesn't work for anybody. He's independent now. He just runs social media accounts and he gets, juicy stuff when he can. Surely he must have tried to get some engagement out of this one. Nope, nothing. And yet Schefter, like you mentioned, calls this a robbery originally. Our Matt Yoder tried to dig around when he wrote about the Schefter side of this and couldn't find anyone else firsthand calling it that. Schefter gets hit with a community note on X, and yet the tweet stays up for hours, and almost by the time it gets deleted, as much as a full day before he eventually just deletes it without acknowledgement and, carries on as normal. I don't, it's like we were past the point of this being a trend with Adam Schefter, where especially breaking news that's related to criminal activity, legal activity, violent incidents, whatever you want to call it, he just seems woefully not up to the task. Like, I hate to say that. Adam Schefter's had a great career. He does a lot of things that, you could easily respect. Like, this is just really bad, and it's a constant black mark for ESPN almost every time we have an incident like this.
Yeah, and it wasn't, if I'm right about this, which I'm pretty sure I am, he didn't delete the tweet until Brian Curtis at the Ringer called it out. And I don't know if that timing
Yeah,
was
and the community
coincidental.
note and Curtis, a lot of people
Yeah.
were piling on, and then he finally
Like
just
that.
deleted it. But he didn't issue a, hey, I've deleted a tweet, I misspoke. It just the deleted, and then you move on.
Yeah. And I don't, did he get fed bad information? Did he make assumptions and connect dots that weren't there? Like, I don't know what happened. Like, I know, like, probably the sexy conspiracy would be like Mark Sanchez's agent like fed it to him to try to shift the narrative, or like, I just don't know. Like, okay, you're going to shift the narrative for 2 hours and then the real story is going to come out and everybody's going to look like an idiot. Like, I don't know.
Which
So
is
I don't,
the same thing we saw that we kind of dug up as we were looking back on Schefter's history with this stuff. That's what he did with the Dalvin Cook. I don't remember if it was a lawsuit or if it was an actual arrest at the original point, but he cited Cook's agent in the breaking news tweet and then called it extortion. So, like, I don't think you're stepping over a line to wonder if that similar trajectory is kind of how he ended up with that information this time. It's crazy because, like, if an insider should be able to do anything, this is the stuff that matters.
it is, but it's also like, Mark Sanchez is a Fox analyst. Mark Sanchez isn't the New York Jets starting quarterback. Like, Schefter could just sit this one out. He doesn't.
Which is why I said I was like, it's a little weird that he's even talking about this, and like why I point out that Rappaport, for instance, didn't.
Right. He's inserting himself into a story like that. If he sat it out, I don't think his bosses at ESPN would be like, hey, Adam, what do you have on the Mark Sanchez stabbing? Like, maybe they would ask him, and maybe he would say, I have nothing. And they would say, okay, like, that's fine. This isn't really our story. So I don't know. Like, it's
a story that's being covered everywhere else. So I do just sort of wonder, like, with a lot of these things, with the Cook incident or some of those things, you kind of have to think like that's currying favor, right?
Yeah.
That would probably be that. But for something like this, it's like, is the only point just to get engagement? And if so, like, that's disgusting. Like, it's just, there's no other really way to put that. If you're weighing into a thing where a dude was brutally beat up and Sanchez is in a hospital bed with stab wounds and the police are at work trying to figure it out, what else? Like, if you're wading into those waters just to get some clicks, like, it's insane. You make unseemly amounts of money. Why do you need to do that?
I don't know. It's very bizarre. I agree. This becomes a black mark for ESPN. It's an NFL Sunday, and this is what people are talking about. Like, people are talking about this during the slate of games. That's when all this went down, with Brian Curtis calling it out and the community notes, and ultimately Schefter then deleting it. Like, it's weird that it happened, and it's weird that there's no contrition, there's no retraction, there's no apology. I mean, there's like real effects to this stuff too. Like, it's a big negative initially for Indianapolis. And I think that, like, we talk about this but there are some people out there who probably just still think Mark Sanchez was stabbed like in a robbery. Like, sometimes the initial story for people, that's the only thing that ever gets out. And maybe that's ultimately the goal with this kind of stuff. I don't know. It's bizarre.
Well, I think that, I did see a tweet on my For You page where you just end up in these random territories that you're not expecting, where there is like a little bit of criticism of like Indianapolis and, crime and whatever, that's kind of picked up in, I would say, more right-wing commentary circles. I pointed out in the newsletter, just to give a sampling, that some guy, some ex-influencer account, whatever, aggregator type person with like 2.6 million followers posted this, and his tweet was still up as of Sunday night when I looked into it. There was a Cincinnati local news station that ran with Schefter's account of things. Like, you are seen, if you are Adam Schefter, as the go-to source of information on all things NFL, all things football. So when you put something out, some intern at a local news station isn't gonna, that's the news as far as they're concerned, and so
it's the record.
It's awful. Yeah, it's the record. And it's like, it's one thing to get it wrong. That's going to happen, especially if you choose to cover things that are so obscure relative to your normal area of coverage. But to not have any sort of pattern, or I guess a process, I should say, in place to, you know, like, it sounds so quaint. I know we're so past this, but like, this is the type of thing that like an ombudsman is supposed to be for. ESPN used to have one of those, or any like any
Right.
sort of oversight or anything that goes on. Like I pointed out in the article, like Schefter, it's not so far different from the the meth streams or whatever it was link that he shared, or like these weird video accounts that he's like reposting from now. Like, what the hell is going on with Adam Schefter's Twitter feed over the past couple years? And it's funny when it's those things, but then when it's this, it's like, is he just running his own little shop? Like, you gotta, does he have a boss? Like, who is Adam Schefter accountable to, where he can just leave information up like this? And Joe Schmo in Cincinnati now thinks Mark Sanchez was a victim of out of control crime in Indianapolis. Like, this stuff does happen. This is how it kind of plays out.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Mark Sanchez does have a very prominent NFL agent with a lot of clients in the league right now, for whatever that is worth. He is with Athletes First, which is David Mugaletta's company, which reps like all of the most high profile clients. So not for nothing, Mark Sanchez has a very prominent NFL agent still.
And yet somehow all of the other insiders resisted the temptation to get in good with Athletes First and did the more responsible thing. So it is, in fact, possible. All right, let's close here, Ben. We're not going to do hot mics today. I have, first of all, a shout out, because the Ravens suck right now. And so we have gotten full circle back to not an actual point being made that Kyle Hamilton could fix their season, but I am now hearing references to last year when Kyle Hamilton shifting his position did in fact save their season. And that is the name of our beloved Kyle Hamilton of the Week segment, where we go through an overused factoid that everybody in sports media is regurgitating, which of course was, Kyle Hamilton moving from a linebacker type of space in the defense to the more free safety that unlocked Baltimore last season. That's long gone, but I have a different one. We're not even doing that this week. I just wanted to set the stage because I need your help naming and putting together another such segment, which is something that I want, in this case, football media, but we'll just say sports media. Like, as I'm consuming the games and the storylines, that I find myself desperate to hear commentary about, and yet I'm not getting it. And so I'll give you what I mean this week, and we can flesh it out here. The rejuvenated quarterbacks becoming somehow like this constant every year thing, where now Daniel Jones is the latest, Baker's an freaking MVP candidate, Sam Darnold. Like, I feel like there have been so many more of these over the past few years, where I can't help but wonder, like, what changed, or what is it that, we're giving up on guys too early now so they have a better chance at a second shot? Is it that, offenses are developing like a foolproof scheme that, I don't know. I'm not smart enough. I don't cover the NFL, but everybody's just sort of like, we're hearing Colts chatter, but more from the standpoint of like Shane Steichen's a genius, or the roster, or Jonathan Taylor's healthy again, whatever. And I'm like, Daniel Jones L. Duncan went viral for talking about how he was playing safety on the practice squad last year.
Yeah.
Now he's like leading the best offense in the NFL. Can we get a little deeper? Because something is so strange here when this is now becoming a pattern. So that's what I want to hear more about. Maybe I'm just not finding it, but what do you think we can call this, and what are your thoughts on that lack of a story here?
I think it has to be named after Sam Darnold, whoever it's named after, because he's the first one who I can remember was like, oh, this guy was a bust. And then like a year later, it's like, oh, this guy like might be a franchise quarterback. We got that one wrong. Like, forget 5 years worth of analysis. Like, this guy is going to make $40 million next year. It's funny because my team, the Cleveland Browns, they traded for Kenny Pickett this past offseason. And the initial defense from all the fans who defend everything was like, oh, he'll be this year's Sam Darnold. So maybe that's the name, is this year's Sam Darnold. Like, some sort of,
I like it.
Yeah, and
I like it.
this year it's probably Daniel Jones. But yeah, I mean Mac Jones. You could put Mac Jones in that category. That's where I thought you were going with this. Is a narrative that has emerged is Mac Jones was the quarterback who Kyle Shanahan actually wanted to trade for when the 49ers traded up in 2021 and they took Trey Lance. And I always thought they wanted to trade or I always thought they wanted to pick Mac Jones and got bullied out of it and took Trey Lance instead. But now Mac Jones is in San Francisco. It's this weird situation. That's what I want to know more about is like, what the hell happened with the 49ers in that 2021 draft? So that kind of fits in similar. As it's similar, but yeah, I think it's the Sam Darnold corollary.
Maybe that's what I like this year's Sam Darnold because it's so obscure, because also like this is not just a football segment. Like there are going to be times where all of a sudden, like, some rugby prodigy is like a superstar, and I'm going to be like, can we talk about the rugby prodigy? And I'm just going to say this year's Sam Darnold, and then it's going to be like, some Australian dude that nobody's ever heard of. Like that's going to be part of it. So I kind of like the obscurity of that.
When Michael Porter Jr. is averaging a triple-double with the Nets this season.
Exactly.
It'll be this year,
and
Sam
he'll
Darnold.
Just be this year Sam Darnold, even though we'll do it like, 100 times in a given year. I like that. Okay, that works. And that's the end of the NFC West talk on the show, as I promised all the way at the beginning. I'm not interested in discussing how those teams win with their backups or guys who were left for dead. And my team somehow ruined the most fun college football player of the late 2010s. We'll just, leave that there. That'll wrap us up. Hit follow, hit subscribe wherever you have found us. We're on YouTube live 3 times a week. We're also on all podcast platforms. We're also over at awfulannouncing.com, where we cover all of this stuff day to day, minute to minute for you, and across the social media universe, X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and beyond. Enjoy your Monday, and we'll catch you tomorrow.